Some new potential RE4 remake leaks just surfaced and they're quite interesting to say the least, so with that being said, let's get right into it. About the game, there have been RE4 remake leaks. Obviously I think it goes without saying, but take all these leaks with a grain of salt, since most of this hasn't been revealed or confirmed by Capcom. There's definitely a lot of leaked information to go over, so let's recap the old leaks. Firstly, I'm gonna recap the old leaks from the document, which all come from old builds of the game. Because we were discussing old builds, it is very well possible that this list won't entirely reflect on the final product. It starts off by saying that Leon won't counter the Bella sisters during the mine segment of the game, and they will be led by a mutated Dr. Salvador. As for Dr. Salvador, he will be a reoccurring boss up until the mine area. Each time he is defeated, he will mutate further and further, with his final form looking very similar to the chainsaw guy from the Water World Mercenaries map. Next up, it states that the Del Lago boss fight plays almost exactly like the original, but in this game the spears you throw at it are limited. Chief Mendez will play somewhat of a stalker type role, but he really won't appear that often. His home has been expanded upon and he will chase the player throughout it. Mendez will grab nearby enemies and push them towards the player while cursing at them in their native language. And lastly, for Mendez, it states that his final boss fight will be very similar to the original game. From there, it states that there will only be 2 Gyarados in the game. They won't die, instead just get knocked out when defeated in each area until the end of the castle segment. U3 has been completely redesigned and there will be changes to its encounter. It will be very similar to the baby in Resident Evil Village, where the player must solve a small puzzle to escape a very dark area before moving to a bigger space to battle it. The area contains a lot of nitrogen containers to slow it down. Next, it says that 2 El Gigante fights have been completely removed, leaving only on in the village. Krauser's design has been completely reimagined. He is now wearing a full black sweater with tactical clothing around him. The Regenerators and Iron Maidens will be much scarier. Instead of having one variant each, they will come in 4 or 5 different variants like long, regular, obese, abnormal, etc. Each of these variants will have the parasites controlling their bodies set in different locations. Next up, it states that the Salazar boss fight will be very similar to Moreau's boss fight from Resident Evil 8. The fight will be located in a very large hallway with pillars. Salazar himself will still be protected by his shell until the player defeats his left hand. The Novastadors have been completely cut and the huge Salazar statue remains in the game, but in the remake it's not a statue. Now, something I need to mention is that this leaker said that the devs did actually decide to bring the Novastadors in the game. He also mentioned that the Novastadors will be very similar to the Chimera from the Resident Evil 1 remake. Now moving on, the next leak states that in the dungeon within the castle, Leon must find a key to unlock the only exit door. The dungeon is pitch black, so the player must rely on a flashlight to look for clues while trying to avoid a new stalker enemy with a long hook. Shining the flashlight at the stalker will cause it to cry and evade. From there, it states that Luis Serra will be a boss fight in the game. He will help Leon and Ashley up until the infection takes over and he mutates uncontrollably. Then it says when playing as Ashley, you will be equipped with a handgun, but a few gameplay mechanics will be different, one of them being that her aim will be very shaky and hard to control. Also, the aim will not include a reticle. It then states that Dr. Salvador will dual-wield a pair of chainsaws. Salazar will have a huge pet spider that will include a boss battle where you can either kill it or escape. The laser room will make a return, but it won't be over the top like the original and take a much more serious approach. And lastly, the leaker mentions that Wesker will make an appearance in a helicopter during the game. From there, we move on to the new RE4 remake details. He starts off by saying the strong reason that the Chainsaw Ganado's head appearances like that is because his head is actually split into 2, which is causing the parasite to be exposed, and because the plaga is sensitive to sunlight, the Chainsaw Ganado covers his head with the potato sack. From there, he goes on to say that the rest of the leaks I've shared previously from the early build are still present, but with a few things changed, the Chainsaw Ganado will still mutate as the story progresses. The Resident Evil team has only shown 10% of what the game has to offer. They are keeping so many contents like the enemy with the hook within the dungeon hidden for now. Ashley with the gun is still playable, but apparently she is not used to guns, that's why she is shaky in her gameplay. The scene with the infected Ashley at the end of the trailer happens in the middle of the game, when Sadler got temporary control of her trying to kill Leon after many failed missions from his followers, but luckily Ashley was ultimately able to resist the plaga and avoid shooting Leon. From there he says, in the beginning cutscene 2 cops were present when they reached the destination. One of those cops immediately leaves to investigate. After waiting for a while with no response, the other cop goes to explore and tells Leon to wait in the car. Almost 1 hour goes by with no response, causing Leon to get frustrated and leave the car to look for them. He then goes on to say that the cop was actually alive before the Ganatas burn him at the village, which tells me that we will probably get some sort of cutscene in the cop's perspective before he dies. Next up he tells us that the developers decided to switch gears and actually add the Novistadors in the game. Like I mentioned earlier, he did say that they will be similar to the Chimera from the Resident Evil 1 remake. He then says that the Ganatas in the island are there, but not too similar from the original. Instead they are a little more deformed, a bit similar to the Soul, that's from Resident Evil Village, but not as exaggerated in design. The island is the area that got the most rework to make it more exciting than both the village and castle sections. His source never saw the island section, but he does know about Krauser. His character got reworked to make more sense for the rebooted storyline. After this he re-explained that most of these leaks he shared were from older versions, which means that these leaks could have went through a few changes while he was re-explaining this. He also mentioned that the Gyarados models are redesigned and they will be programmed similar to the propeller enemy from Resident Evil Village. There you have it, those were all the new Resident Evil leaks. It's definitely a lot to take in if true, so do be sure to let me know your own thoughts about all this down in the comments below. But anyways, that is gonna be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and I'll see you next time.